When I first started doing this work, people launched a kind of draft Lessig campaign. They raised a bunch of money trying to get me to think about running. My congressman had just died, Tom Lantos, who was, a guy who had served forever, and was a real kind of picture of what a public servant would be. So I agreed to consider running, and Joe Trippi, who ran Howard Dean's campaign, flew in, appeared on my doorstep, and said, "I'll run your campaign." So I said, "Well, let's talk about it." And he said, "But you need to promise me that every day between today and the day you announce your retirement from politics, you're going to be willing to get on the telephone for 2 to 4 hours and call people and ask for money." And I said, "Joe, no, I've got like a lot of email people. I could just email people and ask them." And he said, "No, you've got to call them." And I said, "Well, that makes this very easy because I just psychologically could not do that." And then I thought, well, who are the people who can do that? What is that person like?
What are we selecting out for, in effect?
Exactly right.
Yeah.
I was on a panel yesterday at New America with Zephyr Teachout, of course, local hero, who ran in the primary against Governor Cuomo on a corruption campaign issue. And she described it like this, which I think is really insightful and powerful. She said, the system bleeds leadership out of our politicians. Because if you spend 2 to 4 hours a day on a telephone sucking up to people of power, begging them for your money, how can you become the kind of person who will be a leader, political leader? So we filter out the people whose, self-respect or ego, you tell me what it is too great to be able to do that, for the people who are happy to do that. And those people are precisely not the people we need to be leaders at a time when we're facing, really critical problems. Now, if you are deeply conspiratorial, I'm not, but if you were, you would say, "Oh, perfect."
That's how they do it.
That's how they do it, to make sure that those who have power, are not resisted by those who are supposed to have power, like our democratically elected representatives. But that turns out to be the way it is.
Yeah, but so going to this question of people's sense of hopelessness about it, you tried in this last campaign cycle a completely new, original, insane way of addressing this, which was you created this PAC, Mayday, which raised $10 million in order to support candidates who would commit themselves to change. And it failed. So I guess a couple questions. One is, why were you it turned out really over-optimistic about what would happen, and what are the lessons you take from that failure?
Well, right, we ran in 8 races, and 2 of our candidates won. Only one of them was a really contested race. So from the standpoint of, did we elect our candidates, we failed. But this project was actually a continuation of something Jonathan Soros had started in 2012. Jonathan Soros in 2012 started something called Friends of Democracy, a super PAC, which was in 8 races, and 7 of his 8 races won. But the races he was in, it was not clear to anybody that they were winning because they took this issue on, because they were relatively close, they spent a relatively small amount of money. So the skeptics who say nobody cares about this issue looked at that and said, that doesn't show, it doesn't prove anything. So what we thought we had to do was to take on much bigger bets. At the time we decided to do this, it didn't seem like there was going to be the tsunami of partisan hatred towards the president that it turned out that there was. So it didn't seem like insane bets. And this isn't my judgment. This is judgment of political people who we sat down and they picked the races. But we had to make bigger bets because we needed to take on and win in a big way to dislodge this assumption that people don't care about this issue. We didn't do that. We failed in doing that. So the skeptics are still just as skeptical. The articles that were written afterwards, even before the data came back to show whether in fact people cared about this issue, they announced this was a 0 issue. Nobody cares about this issue at all. But what we just released a big report yesterday with all the polling data that we had done. We released all the raw polls so people can do their own analysis as well. What we can show in this is that indeed, though the tsunami wipes out any of the contested Democratic candidates that we're doing, we moved people on the basis of this issue, and that this issue, the collection of the ways to think about this issue, is among the most important issues people identify as the reasons that they vote. It's just when you step it up against the partisan question, they're not willing to give up their partisan loyalty